There's a view of the world in which the universe itself, or matter, incorporates mind in some strange way. It's called Panpsychism, and I think it's probably one of the most popular ideas in science right now, because it's so mystical and quasi-religious and unexplainable, really, and possibly untestable. But I think it's a really interesting idea, and certainly it features in, well, I guess it's around in some of David Chalmers' writings, I guess. He doesn't call it that. David Chalmers is a neuroscientist who formulated the idea of the hard problem in consciousness studies. But I think there's something of panpsychism in his identification of the difficulty in understanding consciousness, which relocates it out there in the world somehow, rather than being an emergent property of the brain. The idea of panpsychism, as I understand it, is usually associated with Fechner. I think that's how you pronounce it. I might be wrong. Who is an out-and-out panpsychist, but isn't really known for that now. He's mostly known for his identification of relationships between physics and psychology. It's, as far as I know, the only time his work is really used these days in things like identification of threshold points, such that, for example, the quietest sound you can hear identifies a relationship between psychological processing of information and actual physical sound, that sort of thing. But panpsychism, which was Fechner's big thing, really, I think has some really interesting properties. I think in a sort of odd way, we are actually all intuitive panpsychists. It doesn't mean that it's true, it just means that I think there's something about our phenomenology which contains the idea of panpsychism. And I think the evidence for this would lie in those individuals who, either through damage or disease or accident of birth, experience the world slightly differently from the norm. I'm thinking, for example, of people with Capgras syndrome. Capgras syndrome is an odd psychological condition in which sufferers from this condition are unable to, recognize it, but they're unable to get a sense that their closest friends and family really are who they claim to be. A sufferer of Capgras would acknowledge that the person standing in front of them looks like their mother or their father or their sister or their husband or wife, but will deny that that's who they really are. They would say this is an imposter. It's someone else who's taken them over, almost like that film, what's it called, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You don't get a sense that there's somebody you recognise there. And I think what that's about is that there's something, well, I mean, I know there's neurological roots been traced with this, but I think what it must be experienced like as, you know, the lights are off at no one's home. You get a sense that there's this person in front of you, but all the intentionality of that person that you recognise, all of the agency that you recognise, is absent. So you just don't see them as a person. There's no light behind the eyes that you're looking into that you would recognise, at least. I think extending that obviously as it applies to people can help to, you know, the misinterpretation or the interpretation of an absence of a certain mind from people. But I think you can generalise that out to the world at large. I mean, certainly Fechner himself describes two ways of looking at the world, what he calls the night view and the day view. The day view, which I think is as near to natural as we can get. The day view has a sort of unacknowledged intentionality about it. You look out into the world, and there it is, brightly lit, and even though you're not consciously thinking it's alive, there's something about it which is animated and present in that way that actors use to talk about stage presence. There it is, it's just present and awake for you. You contrast this day view with the night view, in which one looks out into the world, and yes, the world is still there, it's exactly the same. But what's absent is this sense of intentionality, this sense of liveness about the world. It's you're looking out at a stage set, or you're looking out at a sort of virtual environment which has been evacuated of any sort of immanence or any sort of meaning. Again, I know this sounds metaphysical, but as I understand it, that is the view of certain individuals. I think it's quite common in autism, for example. I think it's Temple Grandin, who's quite a well-known autistic writer. Unusually, she is able to write quite eloquently about her experiences, even though she is profoundly autistic. And I'm pretty sure in some of her writing she talks about the world that she experiences as having those qualities. She certainly describes her family and the people she knows as having those qualities. I think she memorably describes sitting down to a meal and looking around at the people around the table with her and describing them as sort of sacks of skin draped over those chairs. She knows that they're people, but their internal mind, if you like, is absent. And that can be extended out to the rest of the world. I think another autist, it's not Temple Grandin, but I can't remember the name of this person, I'll have to find out, describes this world, looking out into the world, what Fechner calls the night view. This person described it as looking out into tomb world. So the world is there, but it's dead. It feels dead. You don't get a sense of liveness from it. Interestingly enough, that's also a phrase that the science fiction author Philip K. Dick uses in one of his novels. One of his characters also inhabits tomb world, in which the world is there, but it's not live. I think these examples, these observations of Fechner, and the experiences of people with Capgras syndrome, certain autistic sufferers, and maybe the intuitions of Philip K. Dick, suggest that whilst we may not think of ourselves as panpsychists, or may not think of ourselves as inhabiting a world which has an inner light or a animated quality to it, if it was missing, we would probably notice the difference.